Imagine you're a successful owner of a luxury hotel, proud of everything you've built. One day you decide to visit your hotel unexpectedly, curious to see it through the eyes of your guests. But upon your arrival, something shocking happens. You're treated like an outsider, ignored by the staff, and even denied service. The reason? The color of your skin. You stand there stunned as they look down on you without realizing who you really are, the owner of the very hotel they're working for. That's exactly what happened to a successful black woman named Elsie. What would you do in that moment? How would you handle the injustice, knowing the power you hold over them? Keep watching to find out what happens next, but I promise, it's not what you think. One day, Elsie decided to visit her hotel dressed in simple clothes, just to see how the staff treated everyday people. But something unexpected happened. The staff refused to serve her. They looked at her and judged her by her skin color and clothes, not knowing she was their boss. How do you think she felt? What do you think she'll do about it? Will she fire them? Confront them? Keep watching to find out. You'll be surprised to learn that what happens next is not what you think. The glass doors of the luxurious Crystal Palm Hotel glided open as Elsie stepped inside. She had been the proud owner of this 5-star hotel for almost 3 years, but today, she wanted to experience it differently. No fancy suit, no chauffeur, no special treatment. Just her in comfortable jeans, a plain shirt, and sneakers. The lobby was breathtaking, with its shimmering chandeliers and polished marble floors. The walls were covered in elegant art, and the sweet smell of fresh flowers filled the air. Guests were being greeted with smiles and warm welcomes. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. Elsie strolled up to the front desk, ready to ask for a room. She wanted to see how the staff would treat a regular guest. But before she could even speak, a tall young man in a fancy uniform glanced at her and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but this hotel isn't for people like you." Her heart stopped for a second. People like you? What was that supposed to mean? Elsie blinked, confused. She smiled politely and asked, "Excuse me, what do you mean?" The man's expression turned cold. "This is a luxury hotel. We have a certain standard of guests here. Maybe you'd like to try a place down the street. They offer more affordable accommodations." The words stung. Was this really happening? Her mind raced. Was he refusing to serve her because of her simple clothes? Or was it something else? Elsie had experienced subtle racism before. But here, in her own hotel, she took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. She could easily reveal who she was. She could drop her name and watch the man's face turn pale as he realized his mistake. But she decided to wait. She needed to see how deep this went. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice calm but with a slight edge. "I've heard this hotel is one of the best. I'm willing to pay." The man didn't budge. "Like I said, we have a standard. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at a different place." He didn't even bother to check for available rooms. Elsie felt the fire rising in her chest, but instead of snapping, she just nodded. "All right then." She walked away from the desk, feeling the weight of every step she took. She wasn't angry just yet, more stunned than anything. My own staff refusing me service? She wondered if the issue was just with this one man, or if the entire hotel had a problem. She wasn't about to let this go, not yet. Standing near the entrance was a well-dressed couple, clearly guests of the hotel. The front desk staff greeted them with big smiles, immediately offering assistance, checking their reservation, and carrying their bags. So, it's not about the rooms being full, Elsie thought. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her assistant, Millie. "Everything running smoothly at the hotel?" Elsie smirked, quickly typing back, "I wish we have a problem." She wasn't going to involve Millie just yet. First, she had to get to the bottom of this on her own. Instead of leaving, Elsie headed to the hotel's restaurant. She decided to sit down and observe how others were treated. Maybe this was just an isolated incident, she thought. She hoped it was. She approached the hostess stand, where a young woman with a polite but distant expression stood. "Hi, could I get a table, please?" Elsie asked. The hostess glanced at her, her eyes scanning Elsie's outfit from head to toe. A small frown appeared on her face. Do you have a reservation? No, but I thought I could just... We're fully booked, the hostess cut her off, her tone flat and uninterested. Elsie peeked past the host and saw at least 5 empty tables. I see there are some tables available, she pointed out, keeping her voice steady. The hostess didn't even turn to look. They're reserved. This time, Elsie couldn't hold back her frustration. You didn't even check the system. Are you sure they're reserved? The hostess crossed her arms, looking bored. Yes, ma'am, they're reserved. Elsie took a deep breath. She was done playing nice. She knew this hotel like the back of her hand. Every table, every staff member, every policy. She had poured her heart and soul into this place. But here she was, being treated like an outsider. She leaned in slightly, her voice calm, but firm. Are you refusing to seat me because of the way I look? Or is it something else? The hostess didn't respond right away, but the look in her eyes said it all. There was no apology, no sign of reconsidering. Elsie's heart pounded. How many other guests have been treated like this? She wondered. It was clear that this wasn't just one staff member's attitude. There was something much bigger going on here. She decided to leave the restaurant area, her mind racing with ideas of what she should do next. Should she call a staff meeting right now? Should she fire people on the spot? Her instincts told her to keep digging. She wanted to know how deep this problem ran. Just as she was about to head toward the elevator to visit the upper floors, something extreme happened. The same man from the front desk walked over, this time with 2 security guards beside him. Ma'am, we need to ask you to leave the premises, he said firmly. Elsie stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me? This is private property, and we have the right to refuse service to anyone, he said, his voice a little louder now, drawing the attention of other guests in the lobby. Security guards? Really? They were treating her like a troublemaker in her own hotel. And that's when Elsie knew this was more than just a bad day. This was a full-blown problem, and she wasn't going to let it slide. But instead of exploding in anger or revealing her identity right away, Elsie did something surprising. She took a step back, smiled, and said, "All right, I'll leave." But as she walked out of the grand lobby, she knew exactly what she was going to do next. And it wasn't what anyone expected. What will Elsie do next? How will she handle this unfair treatment? Keep watching to find out. You'll be shocked at what happens next. Elsie walked out of the Crystal Palm Hotel with her head held high, though inside she was boiling with anger and disbelief. As the cool evening air brushed against her skin, she felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: humiliation, frustration, and sadness. How could her own hotel, the one she had worked so hard to build from the ground up, treat her like she didn't belong? And how many other guests had faced this kind of treatment without her knowing? The sound of traffic hummed in the background as Elsie stood just outside the grand entrance. The city lights flickered, and people bustled past, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded inside. She could feel the weight of what had just happened sinking in deeper with every passing moment. But she wasn't the type to sulk or get lost in her emotions for long. With a deep breath, she pulled out her phone and dialed Millie, her assistant. If anyone could help her figure out what to do next, it was Millie. "Hey, Elsie," Millie answered, her voice cheerful as usual. "How's the hotel tonight? Everything running smoothly?" Elsie paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts before speaking. "Millie, I need you to meet me at the office tomorrow morning. We've got a big problem." Millie's tone immediately shifted to concern. "Problem? What's going on?" "It's hard to explain over the phone, but there's something seriously wrong with how the staff is treating guests. I just got kicked out of my own hotel," Elsie explained, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Wait, what? Kicked out? How?" Elsie briefly told her what had happened, from the front desk clerk refusing to serve her to being escorted out by security. Millie was speechless. "Oh my gosh, that's insane," Millie finally said. "We need to handle this right away. What are you thinking?" "I want to see how deep this issue goes. If this is how they treat someone who looks out of place, then we could be losing guests without even realizing it. And we can't afford to have that kind of reputation," Elsie explained. "Should I schedule a staff meeting? Maybe talk to the manager? No, not yet, Elsie replied. I need to see it for myself from the inside. I want to go undercover. Undercover? You mean like pretending to be a guest? Exactly. I want to experience what a regular guest goes through. Not just the nice parts, but the parts where they might be overlooked or mistreated. But I'll need your help to set it up. Millie agreed without hesitation. Of course, Elsie. I'm on it. Let's meet tomorrow and come up with a plan. As Elsie hung up the phone, she felt a new sense of determination rise within her. She wasn't just going to fix the problem. She was going to make sure this never happened again. Not to her, and certainly not to any other guest. This hotel was her dream, and no one was going to ruin it. The next morning, Elsie sat in her office with Millie, going over the details of their plan. The sleek office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern decor, overlooked the city skyline, a reminder of everything Elsie had accomplished. But right now, all she could focus on was the problem at hand. Millie had already booked a room for Elsie under a fake name. She would arrive at the hotel later that evening, not as the owner, but as an anonymous guest. Elsie would take note of every interaction, from check-in to room service, to see if the issue was bigger than just a few staff members. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Millie asked, glancing at Elsie with concern. I mean, after what happened last night. Elsie nodded firmly. I have to. I can't run a hotel that treats people like they don't belong. I need to know how far this goes. Millie leaned back in her chair, looking thoughtful. If anyone can get to the bottom of this, it's you. Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt again. I'll be fine, Elsie assured her, though deep down she was still hurt from the previous night. But that pain only fueled her determination. Later that evening, Elsie stood in front of the Crystal Palm Hotel once again, this time dressed a little differently. She wore a casual dress and a pair of sunglasses. Nothing too fancy, but nothing too plain either. She wanted to blend in, to be seen as just another guest walking in off the street. As she entered the hotel, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Would she be treated the same way as last night, or had something changed? The lobby was just as grand as ever, with its glittering chandeliers and sparkling floors. A soft melody played in the background as guests checked in, mingled, and waited for service. Elsie approached the front desk, her heart pounding just a little faster than usual. A different employee was working this time, a young woman with a friendly smile. Elsie's shoulders relaxed slightly. Maybe things would be different tonight. Hi, welcome to the Crystal Palm Hotel. How can I help you? The woman asked warmly. I have a reservation under the name Sta Jones, Elsie replied, using her alias. The woman quickly typed into the computer, her smile never fading. Ah, yes, I see it here. You're all set for a 2-night stay. Would you like assistance with your bags? Elsie declined politely, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. The check-in process had gone smoothly this time. Maybe last night had just been an unfortunate misunderstanding, but she wasn't ready to relax just yet. She headed up to her room, eager to see if the rest of her stay would be just as seamless. The room was perfect. Large windows offered a stunning view of the city, and the elegant furnishings made it clear that this was no ordinary hotel. Elsie sat on the edge of the plush bed, thinking over the events of the last 24 hours. Things seemed better so far, but she still had a nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach. Something didn't add up. As the evening wore on, Elsie decided to call room service for dinner. She wanted to test every aspect of the hotel's service. Picking up the phone, she ordered a simple meal, a grilled chicken sandwich with a side of fries. Thank you for your order, Miss Jones. It'll be up in about 30 minutes, the voice on the other end said. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Elsie opened it to find a middle-aged man with a cart, dressed in the hotel's standard room service uniform. He smiled politely as he handed her the tray. But as she reached for it, she noticed something odd. His smile faltered for just a second, and his eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place. Judgment, maybe. Here's your order, ma'am, he said, his voice tight. Thank you, Elsie said, tipping him generously. The man took the tip, but his expression didn't change. He lingered by the door for a moment longer than necessary, before finally turning and leaving. Elsie closed the door, her mind buzzing with questions. Was she overthinking it? Or was there something more to that brief exchange? She couldn't shake the feeling that the staff treated certain guests differently, based on how they looked or acted. As she sat down to eat her meal, a sudden knock interrupted her thoughts. This time, it wasn't room service. It was security. 2 uniformed security guards stood at her door, their faces stern and unwelcoming. "Miss Jones?" one of them asked. "Yes, that's me. Is there a problem?" Elsie asked, confused. "We've received a complaint about your presence in the hotel. You need to come with us." Elsie's heart raced. Another complaint, just like last night. But this time, she wasn't going to leave quietly. What will Elsie do next? Will she reveal her true identity? Or is there something else in store? Stay tuned to see how this situation escalates. You won't believe what happens next. Guard cleared his throat. It's standard procedure. We don't ask questions. We just follow the instructions given by the hotel staff. The situation was becoming clearer by the minute. This wasn't just about 1 or 2 rude employees. The staff, or at least some of them, seemed to be operating on a deeply ingrained bias, passing judgment based on looks rather than actions. And now they were escalating it with security, without cause. "I see," Elsie said, nodding slowly. "Well, if I've done something wrong, I'd like to speak to the manager about it." The 2 guards exchanged glances. "That's not necessary," the taller one said, clearly trying to end the conversation. "We've been asked to escort you out." Elsie folded her arms, standing her ground. "I'm not going anywhere until I've spoken to someone in charge." Her voice had shifted, carrying an air of authority she hadn't used earlier. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was the owner, even if they didn't know it yet. And it was time to start acting like it. The taller guard hesitated. "Ma'am, we can't..." But before he could finish, another voice entered the conversation. "Is there a problem here?" Elsie turned to see a well-dressed man approaching, the hotel manager, Robert. She recognized him immediately, though he clearly didn't recognize her. His suit was pressed, and his face bore the carefully composed expression of someone used to dealing with high-end guests. Relief washed over the younger guard's face as Robert stepped forward. "This guest was asked to leave, and she's refusing to cooperate," the taller guard explained, already spinning the story in his favor. Robert turned his attention to Elsie, and for a split second, she saw the flicker of the same judgment she'd faced before. He didn't recognize her. He only saw another guest he assumed was causing trouble. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am," Robert said, his voice polite but distant. "But we have received some complaints. It would be best if you leave peacefully." Elsie's eyes narrowed. Complaints? Who had complained? The only interaction she'd had tonight was with room service, and that had been brief, if slightly uncomfortable. Was that all it took for them to decide she didn't belong?